Hey, what's up, Musers? This is John at Muse for You, here to help you build awesome websites without code. And I'm really excited for today's video tutorial. I'm going to be going over the advanced gradients widget found at museforyoushop.com. Now, if you haven't noticed already, I love gradients. I feel they can add a lot of style to a website. And I've always felt that the Adobe Muse built-in gradients were a bit limited. You can only add a horizontal gradient or a vertical gradient, and you can only choose from two colors. I've actually thought about bringing it up with the Adobe Muse team and saying, hey, can we add some more options to the gradients in Adobe Muse? So with this widget, I've taken it upon myself to really open the door with gradients and allow you to really get the perfect gradient for your website. So I'll be going over how to use this widget. Here I have a few examples. So here's gradients applied to rectangles. Here is a border gradient. Here's gradients applied to circles. And here's full width rectangles with gradients applied to them. So I'll go ahead and get started. I'll just go right into Adobe Muse. And here I have a blank site. So here I'll go to the library panel right over here. And if you don't see the library panel, you can click on Window and then Library. And here I'll just type in Advanced Gradients. All right, so here we have 5 different widgets. We have Advanced Gradients, we have Advanced Gradients Graphic Style, Advanced Gradients 2 Colors, Advanced Gradients 2 Colors Graphic Style, Advanced Gradients Border 2 Colors. And I'm going to go over all of these widgets. The graphic style widgets are for applying gradients to ellipses, and also if you want your rectangle or ellipse to be responsive width and height. If it doesn't have graphic style, you can make it responsive width, but if you do want responsive width and height, you'll want to use the graphic style widgets, and I'll go over all of that in this tutorial. So the first widget I'm going to bring in is the Advanced Gradients widget. So I'm going to click, hold, and drag and place onto my Adobe Muse website. So you might notice at first it just has this exclamation point and it says unable to generate thumbnail. It says this because there's no gradient code that's been applied to the widget. So we'll take care of that in a second. So here are the widget options. We have instance number, we have gradient where we'll enter the gradient code, and we have shadow. If you wanted to add a shadow to the gradient element or to your rectangle or circle, you could do that with this option here, and you could add the shadow code here. All right, so yeah, I'll go over the instance numbers. If you have multiple, or if you have different gradients on your website, you'll want to change the instance number. So here we can see it says enter gradient code from the gradient generator. Oops, right up here, yeah. It says enter gradient code from the gradient generator. And then we have this link here that says gradient generator. So I'm going to click there, and it brings us to this really sophisticated gradient generator. So with this gradient generator, you can add as many colors as you'd like. You can set the angle of the gradient and all these other options. I'll go over a few of them, but I do encourage you to play with this and really see just how many options you have and how customizable the gradient actually is. So here we can see we have 3 tabs. We have simple, advanced, and expert. So I'm going to click on simple first, and here we have 2 colors. So with this gradient generator, you can change the colors by hue, saturation, lightness, and RGB, red, green, and blue, and you can change the opacity of the gradient. So everything is super customizable to get the perfect gradient. With simple, you can only choose 2 colors, and you can change the direction from vertical to horizontal with these arrows here. But it's just a really great tool to get the perfect gradient. If I go to advanced, here we can add as many colors as we'd like, and we can change the direction of the gradient to diagonal and vertical or horizontal, and we can choose a radial gradient as well, which is like a more circular gradient. Here, let me change the opacity all the way up. So there's a more circular gradient. There you can change where the gradient starts and ends here with the slider, and just kind of play with that to get a really nice gradient. And then you can go to expert, and here we have this dial here that allows you to change the angle of the gradient, which is really nice there. So I have a few colors that I'm going to add to the gradient generator, and I'm just going to copy and paste in here just like that. So if you have Hex Code, you can just paste it in the gradient generator. At first it might be RGB, so it'll just be numbers, but you can change that by going to this config option right up here. And then here you can choose between RGB, which is red, green, and blue, HSL, which is hue, saturation, and lightness, or the hex code. If I were to change it to RGB, it would just be numbers, and it would look like this, which is probably what it looks like when you first start using the generator. For now, I want to use RGB, or excuse me, hex. So I have that hex code in there. And there I have those two colors. I can change the angle of the gradient, just like that. And there I have my gradient. So let's say I'm happy with this gradient, I want to use it. We have this button here that says Get CSS right up here, and CSS is just styling code for websites. And if we click on Get CSS, we have this code here. Now here, if you click once, it copies everything, but we don't want to copy everything. We just want to copy everything that's in between the first line and the last line. So we don't want to copy dot gradient and that bracket there, or this last bracket here. So the first line and the last line you don't want to copy. So we want to try to copy, just grab some of this white here and just copy in between the first line and the last line. And I actually have a visual guide within the widget folder that explains what to copy when getting the CSS code here. So everything in between the first and last line. So here I'm going to hit Command C to copy. You don't want to let go of the mouse when you're highlighting because it'll copy everything. So you want to hold and drag, keep holding, and then Command C to copy, or Control C on Windows to copy that code. So then I'll go into the widget, and I'll go into the widget options, and here I'll enter in that code by holding down Command V to paste and hitting enter. And just like that, I have this nice gradient on my website. I can make it 100% width, any size I want, and just have maybe a nice header for the gradient here. I could even add some text with the text tool. I could say Muse for you, and there we have some nice text, a nice header for the website. Looks good. I'll center this and I'll preview, and just like that we have a gradient header with some text. Looks good. If I wanted to add another color, I could go into the gradient generator and click on add stop point right there, and I'll go into my colors and I'll pick one more color here, and I'll just paste the hex code right in there. So there we have those colors. Looks good. I can change the angle, something like that. Actually, I kind of like this angle right there. That looks pretty good. I can change opacity, and what's great, if you click on the color, again, you can change the hue, the saturation, the lightness, the RGB values as well, red, green, and blue, and the opacity as well. So all the colors are really customizable. Then I'll go back into Get CSS. I'll copy this code right in here, in between the first line and the second line, go back into the widget and select Command A to select all, or Control A if you're on Windows, and then Command V to paste and enter. And just like that, I have that gradient in there. It's really amazing. It's a great gradient generator, and I think it's really cool to be able to use in Adobe Muse. So there we have the gradient generator, and you can use presets. So if you wanted to use a preset, just kind of the way the gradient is set up, and then change the colors. So I have a preset there, and I'll just change the colors real quick. And here, just paste that in, and one more in here, and bam, and there I have the gradient. Get CSS, copy everything in between, Command C, go back into the widget, and Command A to select all, and then Command V to paste and enter. Perfect. So there's my gradient. Looks good. So now we have this shadow, this enter shadow code option. This is the same steps as the gradient generator. We just want to click on box shadow generator, and now we can add a shadow to that rectangle that we have in Adobe Muse. So here I'll create a vertical shadow. I'll add a bit of blur to it, and we'll make the spread radius. We can give it a negative value for the spread radius, so it looks like the shadow is just on one side, which is the bottom here. So that looks good. We can make the shadow outline or inset, so kind of the shadow goes inside. I do want it to be outlined, so the shadow is outside. And then after that, you just want to click on copy text, or you could highlight this and hold down Command C or Control C. I'll just click on copy text so it's copied. Then I'll go into the widget and I'll paste that code in here and click enter. And then I'll go to File, Preview Page in Browser. And there we can see we have that shadow underneath the header here, which looks nice. Okay, so that's the first widget, the Advanced Gradients widget. And if you were to have a new gradient, you would just want to be sure to change the instance number here. It could be anything, it just can't be the same as this one, so it couldn't be 1. And everything I just went over is right here as a reference within the widget as well, so you can read that and kind of get a reference for how to use the widget as well. All right, so that's the first one, Advanced Gradients. So now I'll go back into the library panel, and then we have Advanced Gradients Graphic Style. So this is more if you want to apply the graphic style to an ellipse, or you want the rectangle or the ellipse to be responsive in width and height. With the first one, it could just be responsive width, but this will allow you to have a gradient and then set the rectangle up so that it is responsive width and height. And basically what you want to do with this one is create a rectangle with the rectangle tool here, or the ellipse tool. You can create an ellipse or rectangle, and then just draw a rectangle, and then you do want to give it a color. It can't be transparent. So initially it's transparent, so you want to give it a color of, let's say, white. It can be white there, so now it has a color of white, or I'll make it a different color so we have a reference of where it is. So there's the rectangle. So here I'll click on it, and then I'll go to the graphic styles panel. It kind of gets cut off there, but there's the graphic styles panel. I'll click there, and then here we have this little icon that looks like a piece of paper, so I'll click there, and then we have the word style, so I'll double click here on style, and I'll call this gradient 1 because that's the graphic style name that is in the widget. We see it says gradient 1 here. Right up here it says gradient 1, so I want to apply that graphic style name to this rectangle so that the attributes in this widget are applied to the rectangle. So here I'll go to gradient generator, and I'll just copy this gradient here. I'll click on get CSS, copy this code, go back into the widget and Command A and paste right in there. And now if I preview, it is now that gradient. Looks good. If you were to have a gradient with some opacity, you would want to make this white so that blue color doesn't show up behind the opacity. But I'll make it a color so we have a reference where the rectangle is. So now I can make this rectangle. If I go to the resize option here in Adobe Muse, I can make the rectangle responsive width and height, meaning as the browser width gets smaller, the rectangle will maintain its aspect ratio. So like the width and height, it'll maintain the aspect ratio. So as an example, I'll preview, and as we can see, that rectangle maintains its aspect ratio, and the gradient changes as well, or the gradient stays with the rectangle. Looks good. And I could do that with an ellipse, so I'll create an ellipse right over here. Just click on the ellipse tool, and I'll hold down shift to create a perfect circle. I'll give it a color just like that, and then I'll apply the graphic style name gradient 1 to the ellipse. So I'll click on gradient 1, and now this ellipse has the graphic style gradient 1 applied to it. So I'll go to File, Preview Page in Browser, and there we go. We have a circle with a gradient. If I wanted to give it a shadow, I could just go to the box shadow generator, and I won't spend too much time here with this, but we'll do something like that. And yeah, that looks pretty good. So I'll copy text, go back into the widget, and hit Command V to paste and enter. And I'll preview in the browser, and there we have the circle with a shadow applied to it. Looks nice. So the graphic style is more if you want responsive width and height, and if you want to apply the gradient to a circle. If you want a visual representation as you're designing your website, I'd recommend using the ones that are not graphic style. And if you don't need your element to be responsive width and height, and you just need it to be responsive in width, I'd recommend the ones without graphic style. But I did want to include both just in case you wanted those options, the circles and responsive width and height there. Okay, I think I've gone over that enough there. So I'll delete these two. So now let's go over advanced gradients, 2 colors here. So here I'm going to click, hold, and drag and place onto my Adobe Muse website. and right away we have a gradient, and that's because we're not using the gradient generator for this one. So with this widget, you can set the angle of the gradient and the location and the opacity. So it has some similar features to the built-in gradient within Adobe Muse, except you can add an angle and change the location a bit more here. And these options are very similar to how the Adobe Illustrator gradients work. So if I go into Adobe Illustrator, I create a rectangle, and I go to the gradients options right up here. And if you don't see this, you can go to Window and click on Gradient, and I'll add a gradient. And as we can see, the type is linear. We can set an angle here for the gradient, and we can set the color, the opacity here, the opacity and the location, and the same here, the opacity and the location. So we notice this location is at 0%, and this location is at 100% here. So it's very similar options within the advanced gradient 2 colors, and you can set the angle here, different angles and things like that. So you could use the Adobe Illustrator gradient as a reference. So that's basically it. And again, we can add a shadow. So we can go to Box Shadow Generator, copy text, and go to shadow, enter that in there, and I'll preview, and we have a shadow to the gradient there. So it's just kind of another way to add a gradient. If you just want 2 colors and you want more of an angle and a few more options, you can use the advanced gradients 2 colors there. And then we have, I'll go back into the widgets. So we have advanced gradients 2 colors, graphic style. So this is the same, except adding a graphic style to it as well. So I'll just go create an ellipse, give it a color, and then we'll assign the graphic style gradient 1 to it, and preview in the browser. And just like that, we have the gradient applied to the circle. All right, and then we have one more widget, which is advanced gradients border 2 colors. So I'll click, hold, and drag and place right in there. So this allows you to add a gradient border to a rectangle. And here we can set the rectangle background color and the border size. So here, if I were to change this to light blue, the rectangle inside of the border would be light blue. I'll set it to white, and for the border size, I'll make it, something a bit larger, and do something like that. So you could actually have a nice border gradient for the header, just like that. Stretch the browser width, and then you have the 2 colors for the gradients and the gradient angle here, and you can also apply a shadow to the stroke as well. So let me do something like this, 0, we'll add a vertical, something like that. All right, copy text, and I'll paste the shadow in there. All right, and then we'll go to File, Preview Page, and Browser. And just like that, we have this nice border gradient with a shadow. And that's basically it. You can change the colors. You can choose from 2 colors for the gradient angle, border size, and the color within the border there. So you can do something interesting for the color. And yeah, I probably wouldn't use black, but kind of the idea is there. I might use let me add some colors for my CC libraries. And do something like this. Actually, that doesn't look bad. It's kind of a darker blue in there. And then I could add some text. And just like that, we have that border gradient, and we have the text, and we have a shadow here on the bottom as well. And this is stretch the browser width, so it'll respond to the browser. I could add breakpoints to kind of fix the text here as well. So that's it for the advanced gradients. I know I went fairly quickly through the tutorial. If you have any questions, let me know. I tried to make it very clear within the widgets themselves as to how to use it. I know with the gradient generator, the copying of the code can be a little bit tricky at times. You just want to make sure you kind of grab this white here, if I can grab it. Yeah, it can be a bit tricky. So you just grab on the white space and get everything in between the first line and the second line. So you don't want the dot gradient and this bracket here and the last bracket here as well. So just copy that and copy this code in there. All right, but the gradient generator is just amazing. I mean, you can even save out your gradients that you've created and kind of import them, so you can have a library of gradients that you like using and then import them right into the gradient generator and kind of tweak them a little bit so that they're perfect for your website. I was really excited to actually find this gradient generator and to be able to make a widget to use it, because I do love gradients and I think they can really add a lot to your website. So that's it for this website. That is the advanced gradients. So we have the different widgets here, and you can use them right in design mode. You can see the gradients right in design mode, or use the graphic style to apply to different elements, circles, and make it responsive width and height if you wanted it to. But yeah, that's it for this video tutorial. To get access to the widget, you can go to museforYouShop.com. And here you can click on the pop-up, and here you can click subscribe to get access to all widgets and any new widgets I come out with for $39 a year. Or if you'd like to subscribe with PayPal, you can click here and subscribe with PayPal. The advanced gradients widget is right here, and here you can click add to cart to purchase individually, or again, you can get access to all widgets and any new widgets I come out with for $39 a year. Here are the features included, and here I go over each widget and what each widget does. So 1 through 5, here are the widgets that I went over. A few of the widget options here to the left, the preview page, so you can see a few of the shapes and the gradients here. And go back here, and then we have the community section if you had any questions about the widget here, and this video will be right below the preview page as well. So that's it for this video tutorial. Again, I do this to help you build awesome websites without code. If you like this video tutorial, you can subscribe below. Also in the show more section below are links to other resources and links to museforYouShop.com. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video tutorial. Thank you.